All right, let's get into today. I like today. It combines two things, real theoretical, heady type of stuff. One is a story that stuck with me, okay? I heard it, I don't know who told me it, but it was when I was studying economics, and someone said the story, and I never thought of it before, and then I was like, oh, of course they would. That's entirely the right answer for entirely the right situations or circumstances from an economic standpoint. And that's the first item we're going to talk about today. It's a story about a plane and a couple passengers. And the second one is a realization that the same thing, the same exact thing, has different utility, different value, only depending on when it is taken, when it is sold, or when it is consumed. It is such a powerful idea about how much should you buy? How much should you do? Because not every iteration of the same exact thing gives you the same exact result or value. As an aside, this is one of those things where if people are just copying the notes, this is a lecture. Okay? Very few people can understand it fully just by the notes, and if you can, good for you. This is one of those things that you got to kind of talk through a little bit about. So let's get to it. Decision making, 3 of 3. Should I make or consume another unit? Okay, so the vocabulary that we will be using today, first is marginal. Marginal, we're defining as the next. Okay, they say it's the margin on the outside of your paper. What they mean is the next part, right? If you've already done 99 things, the margin is the next 100th time you do it. Okay. Sometimes it's very important to think. They call it thinking at the margin. What's the value? What's the cost? What's the expectation of the next unit? Forget about the first 50 units I did. What's the next one? For example, marginal cost. What is the cost of producing the next unit? Not what's the cost of producing the first, second, or third, but now I'm at a new point in time. What's the next unit? Okay. Marginal utility combines a couple words we already know. Marginal is next, and utility is satisfaction. So what is the marginal utility of the next unit? What is the satisfaction I'm going to get from the next hour of producing something, or the next hour of consuming something, or the next piece of pizza? So that's a little foreshadowing there. Perhaps the value to you of your 10th piece of pizza is not exactly the same as the satisfaction, the marginal utility you got from the second piece of pizza. Which leads us to an incredibly powerful idea of the world. Almost everything eventually, so this could be a theory. Almost everything eventually gets to the theory of decreasing marginal utility, sometimes called diminishing returns. The idea is, as you consume more and more and more, eventually each unit that you consume will bring less satisfaction than the one before. So you can this is the law of, or the theory law of, too much of a good thing. If something is good, if you do it too much, it can actually be bad for you. So, spoiler alert, one of the most powerful ideas is to recognize when you're doing a good thing and you reach that level of, oh, it's becoming not so great for me, so perhaps I should stop. And the final vocab is called fixed costs. In business, fixed costs is the amount of money that you have to spend no matter how much you produce. For example, rent. In my calzone business, I had to spend, I think it was $1,100 a month for rent. It was either $800 or $1,100. It don't matter how many calzones I make. I could literally make no calzones and I still had to pay that rent. It's called a fixed cost. In the previous lessons, we learned what motivates decisions, why we make decisions, and we learned some techniques to make decisions quicker and more effectively. Now, in this lesson, we are going to show that the idea that items or hours might have different values or different costs and benefits. It depends when and how many we're taking. We're thinking at the margin. And if we know that, what should we do about it? All right, so we're going to use a lot of economic terms and a lot of economic concepts to explain a simple example. Or maybe we should say we're going to take a simple example, and from it, we're going to tease out a lot of economic concepts. And it helps us answer a basic question. Should a business produce and sell one more item? Now, the wrong answer would be a business should produce as many possible items as they can. Okay, so you're thinking, well, maybe there's not enough demand for the items and they would produce more than they can sell. Okay, I get that. But even if there was unlimited demand, should a business produce all that they can? And the answer is not always no. The answer is they should produce as much as they can until the marginal cost of that next item is too high and makes it not worthwhile to produce that next item. This might be a little counterintuitive. See, the first 99 items you produce might make you a profit, but producing that 100th item might throw your whole business into a loop, and it might not be worth it. Or spending that extra hour at your job might not be worth it, even though you could spend that extra hour and make more money. Okay, so the answer is not always yes. The answer is not always produce as much as possible. The answer is think carefully about the next hour you're going to make or the next thing you're going to make. And is that next thing worth it, or is that next hour worth it to you? And I'm reminded of the plane example. I thought this was great. You know, looking back at it, it seems so obvious. But you know what? It wasn't obvious to me at the time. And when I learned it, it stuck with me because I'm like, oh yeah, that makes so much sense. So quite frankly, if this is obvious to you, good for you. That's great. Don't judge me. It was one of those impactful examples in my life that helped me learn something. Let's go into this example. Let's say you have a company, an airline, that sells trips, okay? And there's planes, and they sell trips to passengers, and passengers board the planes, and they go from city A to city B. Always a city, I guess. And so here's our example. You got a plane. There are 100 seats, and 99 seats are filled. Should they book that one more trip? Okay? And the answer is yes. 100% yes. Of course, and you know that, but let's look into why it's yes. The definition is because the marginal cost of flying that one more person is low. The marginal cost, how much it would cost the company to put that one more person in, is low. And not just low, it's lower than they would charge the person, so they would make a profit. What is that one line the economist said to me? He said, you know what? Business doesn't go for a big bang for the buck. Business doesn't try to hit a home run. If a business can make $1 by doing something, they'll do it. That's capitalism. If you can make $1 by doing something, the business itself will do it. So let's examine this, right? So the plane is doing a trip, okay? The plane is doing a trip. They filled 99 seats. There are things called fixed costs that are already being spent. No matter what, that plane flying from city A to city B, the company has paid for the crew. They've paid for the plane crew, the ground crew, the gate crew. They've paid the gate rental. They've paid the cost of building and buying the plane, okay? All of those things. No matter how many people are on that plane, they have paid that money. And in order for that plane to get to A to B, they've already paid that money. So, if they were going to add one more person, how much would that one person going from 99 seats to 100 filled, how much would that add to the cost of that flight? It would only add what's called the variable cost. Adding one more person, it literally would be, because they have to pay for all of these over here, adding that 100th person would only add that extra fuel that the weight of that person would consume and the little pack of peanuts, which is probably going to be like 10 or 20 bucks total. And they would, selling that last seat, they would obviously make more than $10 or $20. But even if they would only make $1, they would still do it. So they would definitely make money because they've already paid for their fixed cost. So the marginal cost of the 100th passenger is so low that of course they should take on another passenger. All right, different example. The same passenger, let's say it's me, whatever, I got to go on a Dominican Republic vacation. I am a sane passenger wanting to go to the same place, but I am not in the same order. Okay? Separate example. There's a plane with 100 seats and 100 seats are filled. That plane is full going to the Dominican Republic. And I want to go to the Dominican Republic. Should that airline get me there? I would be the 101st customer. Should they produce one more trip by getting me to the Dominican Republic? And the answer is 100% in this situation, no. But why? I'm the same person. I want to go to the same place. I'm the same Doug. But they would never do that because of where I am. I'm not the 100th. I'm the 101st. We're thinking on the next unit. They're examining me exactly. Check it out. The marginal cost of getting the 101st passenger to the DR is huge. The marginal cost of getting the 100th passenger is just fuel and peanuts because they have an extra seat. But look, if that one plane is full, think of what it would take to do one more trip. Just for me, they'd have to get an extra plane. They'd have to rent an extra gate. They'd have to hire an extra crew for that time. Literally, it would cost like $3,000 to get me to the DR. Whereas if they had that extra seat, it would only cost $20. It's called the marginal cost, the cost of that specific one more. So in your own business, it is not true that you should always do an extra hour of tutoring, that you should always put an extra hour, that you should always stay open for an extra hour. Look, in your own business, you keep producing and selling until the cost of that next unit isn't worth it for you. Take on as many tutors as you want if you're a teacher until doing that extra hour would hurt you because of lack of sleep, or would hurt your marriage, or would hurt what you want to do for relaxation. As for the planes, keep taking passengers until you have to add a new plane just for that one passenger, and then of course you wouldn't do it. Always examine the marginal cost, the cost of the next unit. So for the second half of the lesson, I want to examine a concept of diminishing returns or decreasing marginal utility, or a concept that answers, should you buy one more, or should you spend another hour? How much should you do? When should you stop doing something that's good? Okay, it's the idea of too much of a good thing. So let's take that idea, too much of a good thing, and actually examine it a little bit, and let's put it into some graphs and put it into some economic terms. The answer is, it is a personal choice depending on your goals. When should you stop? But in order to intelligently make that choice of how much should you do or when should you stop, you have to understand the concept of decreasing marginal utility. The fact that if you choose to do another hour, if you choose to buy one more, it usually has less value. It gets you to your goal to a less extent than the hour previous. Okay? So it is not the case that you can just load up and do it ad infinitum forever and make the same gains. You're going to come to the point where spending that next hour, maybe you should have spent it doing something else because the return, the gain you get is so small because you've already spent so much time doing something. The concept of diminishing returns. So let's take an example of the Gatorade. Okay, I'm going to paint a picture here. It's the picture I always paint. You've just sported. You've sported on a really hot day outside, and you have sweated, and you have sported, and you are thirsty, okay? And so, let's say, take all the variables out. There's free Gatorade. Your coach has offered you free Gatorade after you sported. And of course, you are going to, number one, it's free. And number two, you want it, okay? So you're going to take that first free Gatorade and you are going to drink it no matter what flavor it is. And it is going to taste like the nectar of the gods. One of the reasons why Gatorade tastes so good is because it's salt electrolytes. And your body has just depleted the salt and electrolytes by sporting and sweating. And that's why it tastes so good. It's such an interesting idea, you know? Gatorade the same thing with the same ingredients can taste totally different depending on the time you take it. If you eat a really big, like say, Thanksgiving meal, and at the end of that meal, you drink a Gatorade, it don't taste very good. But the second after you've spent 2.5 hours sporting, It is amazing sauce, right? So the same ingredients, the same thing, has different utility depending on when and how much you have drunk of it. So let's create a graph, okay? On the y-axis is a total satisfaction in units. I don't know what a unit of satisfaction is, but I know if you're at 0 satisfaction, your life is sucking. And let's say at 8 satisfaction, you're pretty darn happy, okay? So the y-axis is your total satisfaction. And the x-axis, one of them is the variable. I think it's the x, whatever, ask your math teacher, is the units of Gatorade that you have drunken. And we can create a chart. The first unit that you drink will add to your utility, your satisfaction, by 3 units of happiness. Okay? And so if we start at 0 and we drink 1, we add 1, 2, 3 units of happiness, and we're existing at unit number 3. So that's you finish your sporting, you drink your Gatorade, and you became really happy. 3 units worth. Now, because it's free and you think you might get continued benefit, you drink a second Gatorade. But that one is not as tasty. It will only give you, same Gatorade, will only give you 2 extra units of happiness. So you drink your second and you add to your total satisfaction 1, 2 units. Now you're up at 5. Well, that tasted pretty good. Maybe you'd be done right there because you noticed that the second one wasn't as good as the first, and you're like, okay, I want to get home. Maybe you're worried about too much salt, whatever's going through your mind, but your coach is there, and your coach says, dude, you really need another. So you drink it, the third, and you realize that your coach was right, and it did add not as much as the first. You didn't enjoy it as the first. You had to work a little to get that next one down. But it did help you, and it added 1 more to your satisfaction. And now you're up to a total of 6 satisfaction. All right, so now you got a bucket of Gatorade, and it's free. And your coach says you're done because your coach is smart. But you are not smart because you're not as smart as your coach. And you're like, wow, 1, 2, and 3 worked. Why don't I take a 4th? Because the first 3 was pretty good. I'm just going to take a 4th because you think you know things. But in reality, we all don't know too much of nothing. So you drink a 4th. And you learn really quick what your limit was. You drink that 4th, and literally, you do not feel any better. You drink it, you finish it, and you're like, wow, why the heck did I just do that? Well, good news. You've learned a lesson. You learned 3 Gatorades after practice is the way to go. And on a graph, it looks like 3 to 4 keeps you exactly 0 extra satisfaction. And so you stay the same, and you learned a lesson, and there you go. Life's a good thing. Let's pretend now that you're on a team that sucks. And when I say that, I mean your teammates are bullies. There are teams out there like that. They're toxic, they're a waste of space, and they shouldn't exist. And you know what? It's because of the coaches and the players. And if you're ever on a team that sucks, either try to change it or get the heck out, because it's not worth it. Life is too short to have sports that suck. So let's say you're on a team with bullies. Let's hope you can change it. But if not, here's our story. In come the sports bullies, and they realize that you're kind of swimming in Gatorade and you're not feeling too well because you just drank your 4th, which doesn't really help you out. And they bully you into drinking a 5th because they think it's fun to watch someone drink an extra Gatorade. But that 5th Gatorade, even though it's the same ingredients, actually makes you feel worse. The first one made you feel 3 better, but that 5th one actually brought your total satisfaction down. And then your team is really bad. So they're really bullying you. And maybe you're into it, maybe you don't know what's going on, or maybe you're scared, and you drink that 6th. And it really gets you to that, I mean, you are on the, stomach contents are coming up to your throat. You're on the verge of spewing all over the place. And your total satisfaction has gone from pretty darn good all the way back down. It's almost to where you started just by doing the same thing. You've almost negated all your gains. With a Z. And it could go farther. You could even take it the 7th or the 8th Gatorade. I don't know, figure out which one could give you -8 satisfaction. And if you keep going, even something so simple as this could result in, of course, death. The ultimate badness. And you think I just made this up. I mean, I didn't make this up. Just take this whole scenario. In the 80s and the 90s, and maybe early 2000s, there was a horrible crisis in the United States of college fraternity and sorority binge drinking, where they would go through this whole process, just replace Gatorade with alcohol. And it would literally result in consequences that involved in the hospital because of decreasing marginal utility. Now, luckily for America, in the 2000s, we smartened up and we had this huge crusade, which was ban college binge drinking, educate the kids, educate everyone, watch them, make sure they don't send themselves to the hospital literally every weekend. But a funny thing is, and by funny, I mean, be careful. Because college kids got too smart for their own good, and here's your life lesson. They replaced alcohol, this whole concept of, with water. And guess what we learned really quickly in America? That this whole concept of decreasing marginal utilities, actually, this whole process goes through with water too. You can drink so much water so quickly that it creates so much negative utility, you can go to the hospital and even die from it. That's your biggest life lesson as you go into the world. Watch out how much of anything you put in your body, because even water, which has so much utility when you drink 1 or 2 glasses, if you drink enough of it quick enough, you're going to the hospital because of the ideas of decreasing marginal utility, diminishing returns. So let's figure out how that impacts our everyday life and how can we take this concept and use it to our own advantage. So almost everything follows this. It's almost a law of decreasing marginal utility, okay? Almost everything, as you keep doing it or keep buying it, will satisfy you less and will eventually start to hurt you and hurt your life and hurt your goals. We tend to think, how do you get the biggest bang for your buck? How much do you do or how much do you buy to get the most returns before then you turn your resources and your time onto something else? And the answer is this. It's very simple. The first few units or the first few hours spent will give you the most returns. So do it for a little bit. Do it a few times and then move yourself onto something else per day or per week or per month. And as soon as you start thinking, I've done this a lot, you should start examining, is it really helping me towards my goals or not? Real world examples, the time you spend. Practicing for everything, anything you're practicing to get better at, will have diminishing returns. Eating out. How many times you eat out per week? The first few times you eat out per week are incredibly special. First few times a week. The first 1 or 2 times per month. Okay, we want to save money for our retirement account. You're only eating out a couple times per month. The first few times per month, like 1 or 2, are incredibly special, and it's a great idea. And then, if you keep eating out, it just becomes meh. You're hardly getting any satisfaction, and in fact, it's hurting your retirement account when you eat out 3 times a week, something like that. If you sport, think about it, okay? You can only practice your sport 2 hours, 3 hours a day before it actually starts hurting you. You need to recover to get your gains. Okay. Now that doesn't mean you can't do other things to make you better at your sport, like watch videos and do research and stuff like that, but that's the choice. I mean, you can't just practice 8 hours a day. Nobody practices 8 hours a day in their normal sport and is successful. You have to recognize when to stop your physical practice and turn to your mental practice. And then once you're practicing mental for whatever, you have to know when to stop your mental practice and put it onto something else because of diminishing returns. Which leads me to an amazing concept. I don't know if they call it this. Other people have come up with this. I don't know if they call it the rule of 85%. Okay? Because of the fact that your first few units give you the best result, you can do the first few units of practice or of study for so many different things and get good at it. You will never be elite unless you go 100%, but you can get pretty darn good if you just give those first few units consistently. Okay? So if I'm going to give, 2 hours a day to thing 1 and 2 hours a day to thing 2 and 2 hours a day to thing 3, I will be better than almost everybody in the country at 3 things because I consistently give the first few hours of concentration on 3 different things. You can be really good at 3 to 5 to 7 different things if you know when to, if you consistently give the first few units. Now, if you want to be elite, you can't do that. If you want to be super D1, if you want to be Olympics, you will have to spend 100% of your resources on your goal. 4 hours of practice, 2 hours of mental, 2 more hours of research, 1 hour of eating correctly, and 8 to 10 hours of sleep. You'll be pretty much meh at everything else, but you will be the champion at one thing. So this is very important because you know what you have to do to be a champion, but you also know what you can do to be really, really good at a lot of things, which is know when to stop, know when to get the best bang for your buck. I mean, obviously, when you're not getting any positives, you're going to stop. Only a fool would keep doing something when it's hurting them. And in fact, that's one of the worst things about addiction, because you don't have control and you actually do things. Addiction is this side of the graph right here, where you don't have control and you keep doing things and you're getting negative utility from the things. So I say only a fool would do that while thinking about it, unless for some reason you're addicted, and then you're on this side of the graph. So, but normally, stop doing things when your time or your resources could be spent better elsewhere. Literally, I'm sorry, I hate myself to say it, but when I hit the 3rd hour of a video game, I should be looking at this lesson and say, dude, don't do that 3rd hour of a video game. It's not worth it. You could be using your time for something else because you're not getting the same satisfaction as if you just did 1 or 2 hours of video game for that day. Now, to finish, there's a couple times when this whole theory falls apart and it just doesn't work. Number 1, pizza. Every single slice of pizza is as good as the one before. Eat pizza until you pass out. And then when you wake up, keep eating the pizza. This doesn't work with pizza. And number 2, binge watching series on Hulu and Netflix and TV. Okay? The 10th hour of watching Friends, the 10th hour of watching your TV show is as good as the first. Okay? There are certain things where this just doesn't apply. Economics can't solve everything for you. All right, there you go. Thanks for watching. Hope this helps.